this video is specifically about agricultural methods, or rather methods of production. This is a topic that comes up on a regular basis when talking to people about trading in gold and silver. I want to clarify that this group and gold and silver and copper are not just about a particular method or type of production, or even a particular product, or even a quality of product that is preferred. We do not either antagonize or advocate any particular method of production or agricultural method. And I hope to be able to make the reasons for this clear. The particular things that come up are monoculture versus diversified production, chemical-free versus using chemicals such as pesticides and herbicides, synthetic inputs such as fertilizer, particularly those using fuels which are required in their manufacture, regenerative methods of agriculture, organics versus non-organics and all the definitions around that, in livestock, cage versus free range versus semi-free and the different types of production within that, permaculture versus other methods, hydroponics versus other methods, niche and boutique products versus regular commoditized products. Exchange in gold and silver is not necessarily about any particular type of or method of production, but about voluntarism, cooperation, trust, and the freedom through the income in metals. I've got a couple of questions to ask people. Which is more important? Is it the environment, which is the inanimate or the arrangement of inanimate molecules on the face of planet Earth, or is it about human life, our lives? Which one is more important? I can make an observation about some of the preferences that people have for these particular types of production, and there are some pretty strong or passionate advocates of these different methods. I would say that these methods, given the former question about human life versus the environment, the first one is that many of these preferences are actually similar to fashion or to food preferences. We know that in those fields that the preferences are rather arbitrary and fickle, that they can change, and that they have trends or preferences over time. We also know that these things can actually be political when it comes to agricultural methods, for example. The ideas around environmentalism or burning of fossil fuels, using supposedly non-renewable resources obtained through mining and things like that. These are quite often advocates of or ideas that are advocated through political means, which one would actually cast a fair few questions about. Once again, I'm not saying that these ideas are necessarily right or wrong, or that they should or should not be advocated, but that the underlying political processes involved with them can lead to misleading values and goals in the preferences for particular methods. I want to point out that when we do our business in dollars, this is one of the most harmful and destructive ways that we can actually do production. Now, I know some people may think that that's a really weird thing to say, but it actually is when you look at it. The dollar advocates and supports a hugely wasteful and destructive political system. It advocates and supports wars, which again are destructive to human life, and also destroy the environment for those who are concerned about the environment. They burn a huge amount of fossil fuels. They cause a lot of pollution. and a whole lot of other issues associated with them. The dollar also impoverishes. It also squeezes margins on business, and it is those businesses that are producing which are often hurt the most. And it is that impoverishment and the squeeze on margins that causes a kind of desperation, which leads to things like resource depletion, monoculture, erosion, and other arguably unsustainable practices in agriculture and methods of production. It leads to a short-term view and a resource depletion rather than a longer-term, more sustainable view or methods. In addition to creating a servitude of the producer to government, because the government decides what is actually produced and also where the capital is allocated. So government basically chooses to allocate capital in ways that are destructive and wasteful. This leads to poor agricultural practices rather than a choosing of agricultural practices by individuals who are free. Okay, a really important point here is in this group, it is the consumer who decides what method of production is going to be deployed. The sovereign consumer. This is a concept that is brought up in the gold standard and in the ideas of the economists who lead to the idea of gold and silver. It is the consumer who tells the producer what is to be produced or who sends the signal to the producer in terms of what is to be produced, what quantity, what quality, and by what method. And the means of doing so is at the arrangement of the bill for the production of goods or at the point of exchange, where the customer will deal with one supplier who will give him or her what they want by means of the gold coin, and will choose not to engage with those producers who produce things that they do not want. Now, if they want things that are produced by any particular agricultural means, they can get it. Because the goal of the producer is to produce an income in metals, and the goal of the consumer is to get food that they so desire by offering up the gold coin. And this does not apply in the dollar. That is why I am growing in soil, using particular methods and not using other particular methods, because there are certain customers in this group who advocate for that and who will not exchange gold and silver with me for goods that are produced by other methods. Because I want the income in metals, whereas the consumer in this group wants the products of a particular type of quality. And I have a commitment to continue to grow like that because the customer wants it. That being said, I am also producing by hydroponic methods because there are also customers who do accept hydroponic methods of production or goods that are produced in a hydroponic method. And I want to say something about that a hydroponic method actually has a number of distinct advantages over soil-based production and the different ways of producing in soil, the main one being water. Availability of sufficient quantity and quality of water and able to produce is greatly produced in a hydroponic system. Not only that, the potential for pests and the need for chemicals and herbicides and pesticides is greatly reduced. The production is quite a bit higher or more robust. In addition, I think there's actually not, if there is a difference in nutritional quality between methods produced by products produced in soil versus products produced by other methods, I don't think there's necessarily a strong evidence that there is a big difference between the two. It may be there, but I don't think that that is actually particularly strong evidence. And if it is there, it is only minor. And there are reasons behind that. But these are my personal preferences, and these are conclusions that I personally have come to. And I don't produce expecting that people who don't want those goods will exchange gold and silver for me, with me for those goods. As a final, just as a closing point to this video, if you were denied access to Colesworth or the dollar-based vendors of food, and you were forced to grow your own, what method would you actually use? And if you could obtain food from sources that were not dollar-based, what methods would you demand of those or expect from those who produce that food? That's actually just something to think about, because many of the people who are advocates of particular methods of production do not necessarily acquire their food from similar producers from producers who use the same methods, nor do they necessarily rely on those producers. Yet when the rubber hits the road, that is the question that should be on our mind. If we could not get our food from dollar-based producers, what types of methods would we actually advocate and accept? And I don't think there's a necessarily clear answer for that, but it's a question that we should actually ask ourselves. So that's a bit of a background to methods of production and the thinking that goes behind the choice of methods of production. And I look forward to continuing to produce for those customers who demand a soil-based production method and particular means of production, and those who demand or who are willing to accept other methods.